Good afternoon. Welcome to Richard Beavers Gallery. I'm JJ Pinckney. I will be the moderator for today's discussion. This is a very special event because outside of spaces like this, you never really get to deep dive into what an artist's ethos and what they're thinking and what's in their shadow. We have a very special artist today that I'm very humbled to be able to share some dialogue with. I think the culmination of Juneteenth as well is also very special for us to celebrate one another and to open up our spaces and have discussions. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome for Melvin Nesbitt Jr.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should just kind of open up, kind of candidly. How do you feel? How do you feel today?
I feel really good. I'm excited to be here. Really excited about the show and the reception of the show. It was a successful show. We nearly sold out, and that was really exciting and quite validating. So yeah, I'm feeling really good, and but I'm also a bit relieved that I'm coming to the end of this, really exciting period in my career. So it's my first time showing in New York, my first time showing at Richard Beavers Gallery, and as a solo show. I've been in a group show here before, but yeah, I was very, very nervous in the beginning, but I'm really excited. Yeah, I think things went really, really well, so I'm very happy about that.
That's wonderful. You really feel like you've gotten your feet wet as far as the commercial spaces and developing work for these types of spaces?
Yes. I don't really think of it as making work for the spaces. Mm-hmm. I actually try not to think that far outside of my studio when I'm working, but yeah, I definitely got my feet wet. Yeah, my feet and got a little water on my chest. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And if you could, share a little bit, 'cause I think everybody is really curious on, your trajectory and, your foundation and, how you've been able to develop your practice and, find the success that you have.
Okay, so I guess it was about 7-8 years ago, my friend and partner at the time encouraged me to take some painting classes in DC, where I live. Up until then, I kept sketchbooks all the time, so I was constantly drawing and sketching. And when he saw the works in the sketchbook, he thought that it would really benefit me to study fine art, to take some classes, and try to expand and grow what I was already doing. And I really didn't expect much to come of it once I started taking classes. I, of course, had always dreamed and fantasized about being a professional artist and all of that, but it's not really an occupation that people like me, from places like where I'm from, are really encouraged to pursue. So I was taking art classes in Washington, DC, and studying painting, and the cost of classes and painting supplies was just really intimidating. I set out thinking, I have to learn how to be really great at oil painting, and when I was consistently having to buy tubes of oil paint, like $30 or more, it was kind of wearing me out, and I was afraid of wasting paint. I realized that my paintings were very tight. They weren't really interesting to me. They didn't feel personal. I was just really trying to render, you know what I mean? Not really express or communicate very much, just to kind of, paint an accurate, picture of what I was looking at. And I heard about this artist who I had been following was going to be in town giving a workshop in collage, and he just painted paper collage. And so I was thinking, in order to save money on paint, I could create thumbnails or like sketches of these paintings I was planning to do in collage. And in that stage, I could edit, I could adjust the colors, I could adjust the composition and everything until I had a perfect, small painting, and then I would transfer it to the canvas with the actual expensive oil paint. What I found was that I just got more out of the process of working with paper than I did out of paint. I found that I was less timid and more willing to experiment and try different things. I would make a mistake and I didn't feel like, oh, I gotta throw this away now. It's done. I would just it's just paper. So I'd rip it up, sand it up or whatever, or paste another piece of paper over it. I realize now I could also do that with paint, but at the time, I didn't know any better. But I enjoyed working with paper. I enjoyed doing the collage a lot. And I started to feel like paper as a medium was really important to the types of stories that I wanted to tell. And what I mean by that is that I think that our society's attitudes towards paper and our society's attitudes towards disenfranchised communities, like poor Black communities, were similar. In that you can look out the window here and see pieces of paper discarded all over the streets all the time. So it's like we see very little value in paper and it's easily discarded and tossed out as trash. However, we rely so heavily on paper, in business and packaging and everything. And most importantly, we print our currency on paper. So it's just this kind of weird sort of, imbalance there. And I feel that Black people in these particular communities descended from a group of people who built this country. So to then use them as this easily disposable, discardable people, it just doesn't, there's this disconnect there again. So I just see this parallel, this metaphor in paper that compares to this particular community that I'm making stories about. And specifically what I mean when I say this particular community, all of my work is based on my memories of my childhood in this housing project that I lived in South Carolina. So that's how I got there. And then that's how I got to collage. So I joined social media, was on Instagram, and I got in my first studio, the small, it was like the size of a restroom, that I shared with another artist. And in my metro trips back and forth to the studio, I started sketching people sitting on the metro and posting them on my Instagram. And a transportation writer for Washington Post saw it and interviewed me. And when he came to my studio, I was working on collages. I wasn't sharing those on social media because I didn't think they were ready to be seen. And without me knowing, he'd taken pictures of them and put them in the Washington Post. And then, we had an open studio shortly after that, and people came and they were buying, and they were like, I saw you in Washington Post. And it was really cool. And it kind of grew from that. Like I would get bloggers would write to me wanting to do a blog post about my art. And it came up that 3 local artists in DC decided that they were opening up this space called Stable, which was to be a building full of artist studios intended to make workspace affordable for artists in DC, to keep artists in DC, because we were having this problem of artists would reach a certain level of success and then they'd move out of DC. So they wanted to create the space so that we could have more studio space there. And it was pretty competitive. Everyone had to apply and the artists were juried in. And they chose, I think it was like 21, 22 artists out of almost 500 applications, and I was one of them. And I was really, really thrilled. And It was like overnight. I went from amateur artist and student to professional artist because they got a lot of press surrounding that, and I got a lot of opportunities from there. I met this man, a curator named Malik Glee, who invited me to participate in a group show that he was curating for Mokata. And I did that. They had like 4 of my works in there. The year of when we were in self-quarantine, right after the pandemic. So it was a virtual show.
Oh, okay.
And then the following summer, Mokata called me and said that they were moving and they wanted some artwork for their outdoor gallery. And so they used some of my works there. And Richard Beavers of Richard Beavers Gallery was jogging past there one day and he saw my work and he reached out to me and the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah, I know I was very lucky. I did have a lot of luck, but I was working on my art for many years without it being seen by anybody or ever selling anything.
Right.
So, it was not like an overnight, success story sort of thing. It was just being ready when people came with an opportunity, and that happened to me, a few times where people would bring an opportunity to me and I was terrified, but hey, let's go, let's see what happens. And so.
That's really incredible, especially you talking about how, things weren't as accessible to you, right? The tools, and like one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about fine art is that like it's really expensive.
Yeah.
And so it's also interesting to me, as Black creators, how we find innovation in the midst of, not having the tools necessarily to create what we want. Do you feel as if that a part of this plight, right, a part of this scarcity that you even grew up with, do you think that, it created, almost like an innovation, a deep innovation to create and to kind of overcome those circumstances that, allowed you to develop your work today?
I always knew that if I was gonna do anything great with my life, I would not be able to take a traditional route. I would always have to take a back road somehow. And so when I realized that I had a chance, that I had a shot at actually, making a living off of my art, I really kind of dug my heels in, and I would find as many different ways to get educated and informed and get training as I could. So I was taking classes at this place in DC, and I befriended a lot of my instructors. And I would volunteer to help them in their studios. They would ask me to come help them stretch canvases and stuff, and that would turn into me coming back to help them with something else. And so I'm watching them work. They're giving me their art supplies and stuff that they can't use anymore, or they just want to get rid of, and just a lot of things came out of that. I got my first teaching job because one of the teachers there couldn't show up for a workshop that they were supposed to do. They had planned to do, and asked me to fill in for them. And after that class I did, a couple of the people in the class wrote to the school about how much they enjoyed the class. So then they invited me back to teach more. And it's funny because at that school, I started, as a student, and the classes it was like $500-600 a pop. And so I also started volunteering or working at the desk in exchange for tuition, for classes. And I went from a student and volunteer to teaching, and I ended up on the board of directors, which I did for about 1.5 years before I left. So it was just kind of putting myself into these spaces and around people who were doing or had done things that I really wanted to do, so that I could learn from them. because I was in my mid-30s by then, so there was, very little chance of me going back to college at that time. So yeah, that was kind of how I educated myself when I learned about fine art and participating in shows with galleries and things like that. That was kind of, another example of getting my feet wet. But it's been great because there have been so many people to pour into me, so many people willing to share with me and to show me things and the people who have shared a lot of opportunities with me and calls to artists and stuff. Very specific stuff that they thought, was really suitable to who I am as an artist and the work I was making. So that's always been extremely helpful because I don't know if you're aware of this, but I meet a lot of young and new artists or artists just starting out, and they have no idea how to connect to calls to artists, how to find them. They don't know about their local commission of the arts and humanities and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't know all that stuff either until other artists shared it with me. So yeah, I was very fortunate to be in a community of artists who were very supportive and generous to share their knowledge and experience with me. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, your story and how you navigate is very authentic. And it's almost like the more authentic you are, the more consistent in your authenticity, people see that, people recognize that, and they wanna propel you forward. And it's community, And
it's definitely community.
As artists, it's one of the things when you first start off, you don't really realize how important it is. But man, it really does take a village to really, help you develop your practice. There's some potholes in the journey, being able to kind of navigate through that is really important. And it really, I think we had a conversation and we were talking about ego.
Yeah.
And as artists, we love our stuff. We think it's, the best stuff since sliced bread, so to speak. And what's almost so important or more important than any of it is understanding that it's not about you. It's about what you're delivering and what you're giving to the world. And then staying in that and wanting more to give to the world. It's the world gives you back just as much, if not more. So that's very interesting. I know you just mentioned you're from South Carolina. I don't know if I ever told you, but my father's side, they're from the Low Sea Islands of South Carolina. I'm Gullah Geechee. Which influences a lot of my work. And when they were introducing you to me, it's the first thing I thought of. How we would kind of connect on that. So the rural South, does that have some influences on your work and the way you think about art?
I think so. To be honest with you, I can't call it out in specific terms how it does, but I mean, I'm very Southern. It's a big part of who I am, and a lot of my tastes were developed and fine-tuned in the South when I was still there. I didn't leave the South till I was in my mid-30s. So, and DC is still kind of the South though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so, from a boy from South Carolina, I remember the first time I went to DC when I was a kid, and I saw all these black people in suits, and you walk into a store or to a hotel or something, and they'd be at the front desk and everything, and I was like, I know I'm gonna have to come here to pursue my dreams. And I was 5th, 6th grade when I had that experience, and that part of me, I guess it was right, because it was the community in DC. Actually, that community of support and encouragement and everything, it started with this community that my artwork is about. It started when I was very, very young. I was pretty shy and quiet, and I had a hard time making friends and everything. But when I started drawing, when people saw my drawings, they got me a lot of attention. A lot of kids would ask me to draw them, My favorite thing about that was when they would see it and they would smile. And till this day, that still is one one of the most rewarding things about doing what I do is when my artwork can bring a smile, elicit a smile out of someone. But yeah, they told me when I was a kid that I was an artist. They and not just by saying you're an artist, but like, hey, can you draw this poster for me? I have a book report this week, you know, and things like that. There was a lady who sold little cups of frozen Kool-Aid. And her daughter told her that I could draw. She was like, I need you to make me a sign with my price list on it. And she thought it was so cute. You know, I drew the little Dixie cup and everything with the frozen Kool-Aid in it. And she was showing it around to her friends, and I just remember how proud that made me. You know, that she was so excited about something I had made and was so proud of it that she wanted to show it off. And that was really, you know, that really fed my desire to want to do it more. And I never quit drawing. I never quit carrying a sketchbook. And there was a man who lived in my grandmother's neighborhood. My grandmothers were next door neighbors. So my parents, like, they grew up like 2 houses from each other. And but there was this guy who he was kind of known to be a really heavy drinker. You know, that was really like the thing that people in the community said most about him, that I can remember. And I was sitting on my grandmother's porch one day drawing in my sketchbook, and I didn't see or hear him come up, and he snatched the sketchbook out of my hand and started flipping through it. You know, I was kind of angry. And he looks down at me and he says, you're a real artist. He says, your work is gonna be in galleries and museums one day. I was like, yeah, whatever. And he said, I'm gonna keep this. He passed about 20 years ago, but I think about him a lot. I really wish that he was here so I could remind him of what he said to me when I was a kid. I didn't believe him when he said it, but it never left me, you know? So, and then in DC, when I started sharing my work, local people were constantly coming out, you know, to the studio, to the open studios, or you know, reaching out to me with opportunities or wanting to buy work and everything. And I feel like for many years, I didn't feel comfortable calling myself an artist. But when everybody else started calling me an artist, then it was like, okay, well, you know, they christened me, you know, they assigned me this, and people have always been trying to assign me this, and I embrace it. So now, you know, I do feel that it was the community that the community made me, you know, and so I make work about this community that encouraged and loved on me and made me see, you know, the good, you know, the talent in myself, you know, because a lot of artists, we're constantly comparing ourselves and stuff. So I know a lot of artists who are far better than I am, you know, but I work like hell, you know what I mean? And I do it because it's really important to me to tell very reverent, very honest, and uplifting stories about these people who lifted me up. And I feel like they don't get enough credit for all of the really successful, amazing people that they have lifted up, you know? We all come from a community, and without that love and that support that you receive from the people around you, it's really hard to grow, you know, beyond yourself. So, yeah, I credit my communities for my success and the success of my art.
And you know, I really like that. You know, even when people were validating you with this title, you were still just like, it doesn't necessarily, you know, make what I feel inside or, you know, who I am. And I think that's so interesting because I feel like when we're having a conversation before this started, kind of talking about purpose. And, you know, you walk in your purpose, you know, maybe long before your purpose has a name. And to me, you know, as you're talking about like what you're doing in your community and how your community, you know, at that time, you know, you were using your tools to, you know, help them, you know, whatever their endeavors were, you know, it was, to me, when I hear that as like a form of healing, and you're a healer, and you're using, your tools that, God has bestowed to you, to help and heal and, encourage your community. Your drawing, might have encouraged that person to do the Kool-Aid stand, right? And you're just a child, just a kid. And so, now, very strongly and very intentionally, you make the works that you do. Do you feel that, your job or like how you develop your practice, it's a form of healing? This is a sanctuary in this kind of perpendicular box, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's extremely therapeutic. So another motivation behind telling stories about this community is that around the time I, was a young teenager, I started, and got into middle school and junior high, and meeting more people from outside of this particular community. I got a lot of messages from people that I was from a bad neighborhood, and that they weren't expecting a whole lot from the kids from my neighborhood other than, us being troublemakers or something like that. And it kind of filled me with a sense of shame of where I come from, the shame around being poor, about having grown up in the projects and everything, which I didn't have before as a kid. I was internalizing all of this negative messaging that I was getting about this community that I live in and these people that I loved. I was like, it felt really unfair. No one should have to feel ashamed of their origin and where they come from. I mean, and you hear from other communities, particularly like immigrant communities, how they're very proud of having come up out of poverty and everything. But even still, I feel the sense of shame connected with being from the projects or being from the hood, from a lot of people that I meet or talk to.
Okay, so I want Black people to see this work and to see themselves. I want for when kids from projects go on field trips with their schools to the museum and the gallery, I want them to see places and people that they recognize. I want them to know that their stories are just as important to the American story as, these other papers that are hanging around, in this garden, big fancy museum place with these huge pillars. And, it's obvious that everything hanging here is very important. You know what I'm saying? So if you go into a place like that and you don't see yourself reflected back at you, then you feel like, well, they think I'm not important enough to be included. Well, I want to help, along with, millions of other Black artists, help change that. So those are the kids. The adults, I would like for them to be reminded of a time before they became so aware of the societal pressures and conditions that would negatively impact their lives. Because there's this time, in our lives where our dreams are limitless. We believe that we can do anything with our lives, and we're completely unaware of racism. We're unaware of the fact that we're poor, and how these things will factor in as we get older. And that's a very precious time because I feel like it gets shorter and shorter with every decade. You know what I mean? Like kids lose their innocence so early now. And I just think it's really important to kind of capture that in a bottle for people, maybe after, a long day of navigating white supremacy, you come home and be reminded of government cheese and how good those sandwiches tasted with a bowl of tomato soup. You know what I mean?
First started, was it like go big or go home, or were you like, let me just start a little bit smaller and kind of like work my way up?
Actually, I'd mostly been working 18 by 24 for many years, and I, get a little bit larger. So these are 72 by 72, and I had made pieces larger than that before, but they were like on a smaller scale, and then they were like blown up. But I did one mural before that was larger than this. But like consistently working this large, last year was the first year I had done that. And it was really challenging because I'm used to working really small, and those pieces didn't take as long. So now I have all this space to fill with paper, and I was really intimidated by it. I was actually kind of scared. But I feel like I did a pretty good job. And what I found was working that large allowed me to really get into my figures and my characters. That I was working so small that it was really hard to get the detail that I wanted, because you cutting figures this tall, it's just really, really difficult. So now I am doing more with hands and more with body language and everything, working this large. So I actually really, really like it. I really appreciate that I was able to meet that challenge of increasing the scale of the works. But yeah, for the longest time, I was working like 18 by 24. Yeah.
That's so interesting. When I first started painting, I couldn't really afford materials. And me and my friend, we were just passionate about this kind of newfound skill that we had, and which is interesting enough. We couldn't afford canvases, so we end up inventing idea yo, let's just go to Home Depot. Let's just get canvas boards, have them cut it into dimensions that would match a 48 by 60, 36 by 48. It would be a little bit surprise, you guys are starting off so early and you guys are working so big, but it's out of just the necessity to create and the drive to create and having whatever that's in the room, speaking of...
I'm sorry to cut you off.
Good.
I was gonna say, I wanted to work bigger when I was doing the 18 by 24, but there was the price, the cost of supplies and large canvases and everything, which they're outrageous.
Yeah.
But also, I feared I wouldn't be able to sell them. Yeah. So that's one of the great things about being with the gallery, is that they do that.
They do their thing.
They do that for you. So I can that frees me up, to make. I don't have to limit myself, in that way, worrying about whether or not I can sell it or not, because now I have a partner to and that's their job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just have to make my best work. So yeah, that was another reason why it took me so long to work in larger scale.
Right. And you're obviously developing your practice. You still feel like you're in the early stages. From our point of view, it's totally different. You've been doing this, since you could cut or use an X-Acto knife. What are some, things that you've been thinking about as far as innovating your practice, any new materials?
I'm gonna experiment with different types of paper. I've been, researching papers from different places. I can't even remember the name of it now, but I saw this thing on 60 Minutes about this Japanese paper and just all the labor that goes into creating this paper and how it's extremely thin but really, really sturdy. And I was like, gosh, I gotta find this paper. So I was looking it up online, and it's really, really expensive. And then, of course, shipping costs and all that kind of stuff. So I had to sell a couple more pieces of art. But I finally ordered some. And I want to experiment with, well, actually I'm already doing this, creating my own patterns, apparel and upholstery patterns and things, because they were very specific. I want to make them very specific to the time period, the late 70s and the early 80s. It's hard to find, well, I actually don't use a lot of paper that's already printed on or already colored. I paint on my own paper. So I'm just experimenting with different ways of creating patterns and textures and things like that. I have a friend, an artist named Aziza Gibson Hunter. You guys should look her up. She's really, really wonderful. She works a lot with paper, but she also does lino cuts and creates different patterns and things in the paper that she uses in her artwork. And so she's been giving me some tips on how to do that. So yeah, I'm finding new ways to create as much of my own. I want it to be as much of my own in there as possible, which is one of the reasons why I paint my own paper and everything. And my attempts in the past to create those textures and stuff haven't really worked out as well as I had hoped. So yeah, I'm still practicing that, still working on that, and I think they'll be ready soon. Let's see. But as far as like the stories that I've been telling, I think I want to age my kids a little bit. I've been wanting to include more adults in my artwork, and I think a good way to do that would be to tell more stories about school. I loved my elementary school, which was in this community, and there's a lot of really important stories about social issues and politics and things that happened during that time period that I was very aware of as a kid that I want to bring into my work. Like, for example, we witnessed in class the shuttle explosion. It was really like, because we were so excited. Our teacher had a poster of the black astronaut in the front of the classroom, and everybody was really excited that day, and so we did the countdown and everything, and then within seconds, we witnessed these people die on television, and it's so funny to me that nobody ever talks about that, So I wanted to explore that moment in my work, which is going to be challenging because joy is the major theme of all my work. So how do I, tell the story? Do I focus on those seconds of the countdown? We were all excited, and then we were cheering when it took off, or how do I tell that story? So when I take the kids to school, which is going to be pretty much most of all the next work that comes after this show, I'll include teachers. So that I had a black male principal through elementary school. And he stood out in front of the school every morning, and he would high-five the kids as we came in. But he also would paddle us too if we got sent to the office. I did a piece last year called The Librarian about this black man who worked at the library, and he taught me how to, we were transitioning from the card catalog to computers. And he taught me how to, search for books on the computer and everything. But he also drove the bookmobile to our neighborhood. So, I want to take the kids to school. I want to include more adults in my work, particularly males, because I haven't included a lot of males in my art, adult males in my art up until now. There wasn't a lot of them in the community that, if I'm being honest, there weren't a lot in the community that were positive influences. There were some, I'm not saying there weren't any, but not many, unfortunately. I'm gonna, that's my plan going forward, yeah.
And last question before I open questions to the room.
Okay.
It's kind of a little double question. How do you want to make your work more accessible to your community, and where would you like your work to be seen, as far as dream, location, place, whatever?
I hadn't really thought about that too much.
Okay.
Where I would like it to be seen. Well, in as many places as possible.
Okay.
I really want the community that is represented, people from communities like this, they're the main ones I want to see it. I really want them to see it, and I want them to to feel nostalgic and to see themselves and feel a sense of joy, you know, and yeah, I haven't thought about like places, particular specific places I'd like it to be in. I would like to do a show in my hometown. I actually haven't shown, well, I haven't shown any of my collage work there. I have some paintings at the public library, but I haven't, they haven't seen my work in person since I started doing collage. And I feel like, you know, this needs to go home. Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully my next show, we can take it around.
Yeah.
And I can take it to my hometown, so, yeah.
That would be beautiful. I want to open up the conversation to the audience. If anybody has, you know, any questions, feel free.
First, this is all my childhood, so I really appreciate you. I mean, like,
Thank-
the faces are just so joyful, and I don't even know how you. Actually, that's the question. It's really how, like, did it take you a long time to kind of figure out how to like see that inner, how the inner light come out? Like, they're like the joy in the faces is so pure. Like, it take you a while to kind of construct the facial expression.
The faces are kind of hard because for years I was doing these collages and I wasn't making faces because they were so small. And so I couldn't like get the little details and everything. And when I tried, they looked so distorted till they were almost kind of grotesque. So I just like started leaving the faces blank. It wasn't until I started working larger that I started doing faces. And they have been challenging. But the more I do, the easier it becomes. You could probably guess that these two would be, you know, the first two out of these that I did, because the faces are a little rougher, I think, than the others. Yeah. So the way I could tell you how I do it. The way I work is. I would do the entire figure and the face would be blank. You know, I have the color, the paper down for the color of the face and some values, you know, to create the form and everything. But then I just take a sheet of tracing paper and lay it over it and start drawing in the features. Yeah. And then from that, I will cut out my shapes, you know, to make my faces. But something I just realized over the last few weeks that I could do it much easier by doing like a silhouette, connecting the features and then kind of filling in those spaces. But faces are challenging, but the more I do, the more comfortable I get with it, and the more they look, the more convincing the expression it is. So like the last one I finished would have been this one and that one over there. Yeah, and as you can tell, and this was actually the very last one I did. And so the faces, I feel, are much easier to read than the other ones.
You know, these kids are like, oh my God, I am playing this game. You know what I mean? They know regardless of like, you know, I can remember just saying.
One thing that I noticed was that I kept doing my own face, like on all of them. It was so weird. And I don't know why they were just turning out, and they was like, oh, they all look like me. So, but yeah, I get to play around a little bit with, you know, messing with the shapes of the noses and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the thing is, making the features look distinctly black, because I have, in my family, like there's a lot of us are really, really light skinned. And if I just use skin color, you know, to say these are black people, it's, you know, there are gonna be some people in there that are gonna wonder if they're black or not. So I try to use the features to and make them recognizable ethnic features. Yeah. And sometimes that's more challenging than others. And like I said, I realized that I was making the same face over and over again, so you have to switch it up.
Anyone else?
How long would you say it takes you to make a piece that's like this large?
Anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
Are you like answering any questions to like your younger self, or are you reliving your childhood with these paintings anywhere? Or
Thank you.
Is there any like personal questions that you may be answering, or
I'm realizing that I'm reclaiming the innocence that was taken when I was abused, remember when I said that I felt like I had a really bad childhood? I'm just kind of, not reframing the story or retelling the story. I'm just looking at it from a different angle. I'm focusing on different elements than what I was in my thoughts for so long. You know what I mean? It's like I said, I realized that I could choose whether or not to continue to be tortured by my thoughts and feelings about the abuse, or if I want to indulge myself in those joyful